My name is Hollis Quinn, and on the night everything changed, I was seated at the edge of a ballroom filled with laughter that wasn't mine. Crystal glasses clinked, cameras flashed, and the spotlight moved from table to table, never quite landing on me. I had been invited as a +1, a quiet courtesy from my younger sister Claire, whose company was being honored for some groundbreaking healthcare tech integration. Our parents were there too, sipping Chardonnay and glowing with pride, basking in the reflected glory of Claire's moment. I heard one of our cousins whisper, "Poor Hollis. Still floating around, right? Never really made it?" And someone chuckled, not cruelly, just dismissively, like you would at an old family rumor no one bothers verifying. I didn't correct them. I hadn't corrected anyone in years. Then the CEO of Xerix Pharmaceuticals stepped up to the stage. The room fell into a soft hush, cameras swiveling to capture the moment. Claire stood beside him, her smile trained and perfect. He began. "Before we continue with the announcement, I'd like to acknowledge the person who originally built the platform that made this integration possible. She isn't on your program, but she's in this room." The silence stretched like pulled wire. And then, he turned his eyes directly to me. "Hollis Quinn," he said. "She's the real founder here." They never asked where the idea came from. Not really. They just assumed it had always belonged to Claire because she was the one who knew how to pitch it with a polished grin and tailored dress. But the first draft of the platform, the real bones of it, was written by me in a coffee-stained composition notebook during my final semester in grad school. I had spent 2 years shadowing nurses in underfunded clinics, watching how many patient files went missing, how often doctors had to make guesses in emergencies because records never made it from one facility to the next. I didn't want to build another patient portal. I wanted a secure, decentralized bridge between rural providers, urban hospitals, and private specialists, so a child in Montana and a senior in Detroit could have their charts visible in real time to a team, not a silo. I called it TRACE, Transparent, Real-Time Access to Clinical Exchange. I built the beta version myself while juggling research deadlines and a part-time job cataloging tissue samples. Claire was still trying to find her lane back then. She'd bounced from tech PR to cosmetic brand consulting and had just been laid off from a failed blockchain startup. I remember the night she read the one-pager I left on the kitchen table. "This could be big," she said, "but you'll need someone who can sell it. You're not presentation material, Hollis." I let her in, not because I agreed with her insult, but because I was too tired to fight. I believed in the idea more than I cared about credit. And she was my sister. You don't expect betrayal from your sister. We started Quinn Clinical Tech the following spring, just the two of us in a shared co-working space. I handled everything behind the screen: security protocols, data architecture, compliance with HIPAA guidelines. Claire smiled at investors and handled the money. At first, it worked. Until the seed funding came in. That's when her boyfriend, Evan, a smooth-talking JD with big teeth and bigger ambition, offered to help us formalize things. I still remember the conference room where I signed the new shareholder agreement. I hadn't slept in 2 days. I was overwhelmed and didn't want to slow things down. One clause changed everything. My original IP was folded into the company without royalty protection. My 50% stake quietly became a non-voting class. 6 weeks later, I was transitioned out of operations, just like that. I asked our parents to look at the documents. They skimmed them like an old receipt and said, "Well, maybe this is for the best. Claire's better at the front-facing stuff anyway." I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just packed my things and left the office I'd built. No farewell party, no emails, just a clean break and the echo of everything I should have protected. That was the last time any of them asked what I was working on. They assumed I had failed. They didn't know I was just getting started. I left the city 3 weeks later with a duffel bag, a folder of my old notes, and no intention of ever returning. Colorado wasn't a strategic decision. It was a survival one. A colleague from grad school had mentioned a research center there, mostly focused on rural healthcare logistics. They didn't ask for resumes with glossy logos, just results. I started small, designing back-end tools, cleaning datasets, building out API bridges that helped rural clinics speak to larger systems. Most people thought I was a contractor. Some thought I was overqualified. No one knew I had once been a founder, and I didn't offer it. In silence, I rebuilt, not trace. That name belonged to them now. I built something better, Auralink, a silent system, invisible to patients, but powerful behind the scenes. It optimized record sharing, reduced data loss, and streamlined compliance reporting. It wasn't flashy. It was efficient, scalable, secure. Everything Trace was supposed to be, but never had the chance to become. This time, I protected it. I hired a legal team before I wrote a single line of code. I established Auralink through a holding company registered in Delaware, with a nominee CEO to shield my identity. I filed patents under an LLC no one could trace back to me. I knew the game now. By year 4, Auralink had secured contracts with several mid-sized hospital networks. By year 5, it was the infrastructure partner for 3 of the top 10 medtech platforms, including, ironically, the very one Claire's company used after they pivoted to focus on enterprise integration. They didn't know, not Claire, not Evan, not the investors who once called me a quiet risk. They were licensing my technology through a third-party vendor. Every quarter, a small piece of their revenue made its way into Auralink's books. I'd see Claire's name pop up in articles sometimes. Innovator, they called her. Visionary in health tech. I didn't click. I didn't need to. Instead, I reinvested in silence. I grew a team of real engineers, researchers, legal minds, people who didn't care about stage lights. We built quietly because quiet was safer. The only time I came close to contact was 3 Christmases ago, when my mother sent a group text. "Proud of Claire's Forbes feature. Hollis, hope you're well." I replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was all. I let them believe I had disappeared. I let them say I'd failed. It kept them far away from what I was really doing, because sometimes the best way to reclaim your name is to make sure they don't see it coming. It started with a phone call I almost didn't take. The man on the other end introduced himself as Malcolm Trent, head of strategic partnerships at Xerix Pharmaceuticals. He was polite, direct, said he'd been following Auralink's growth for some time and wanted to discuss a multi-phase acquisition aligned with infrastructure consolidation. Translation: Xerix wanted to buy us. I scheduled the meeting, but not at our office. We met in a nondescript conference room in Denver, the kind with neutral carpet and filtered water pitchers. Malcolm came prepared, binder in hand, charts memorized, and an offer that wasn't just about money. "We're building a fully integrated health ecosystem," he said, "but our current tech partners are a patchwork. Yours is the only system clean enough to scale globally. We want to acquire Auralink, and we'd like you to stay on in a board advisory role." I didn't answer immediately. I let him keep talking. It wasn't until he showed me the breakdown of Xerix's pending partnerships that I saw a familiar name. Quinn Clinical Tech, Claire's company. I leaned back in my chair. "So, you're acquiring them too?" "Not directly, but we're finalizing a technology alignment deal. Their infrastructure is, well, it's entirely dependent on Auralink APIs." He didn't realize what he'd just told me. Or maybe he did, and just hadn't connected the dots yet. Either way, the irony settled in, slow and satisfying. Claire's company had grown on the very bones of what I rebuilt. I took the deal, quietly. We negotiated for 4 months, behind ironclad NDAs and a shell firm that masked my identity through every round of due diligence. By the end of it, Auralink became a Xerix subsidiary, with 18% equity and board voting power retained by me personally. 2 weeks after signing, I received the invitation. Claire forwarded it herself, almost casually. "Xerix is announcing our integration at the annual gala. Should be big. Thought you might want to come support." Support. I RSVP'd yes. And I wore a navy dress, simple makeup, no entourage. I walked into that ballroom without any fanfare. No one even recognized me at first. Until Malcolm Trent spotted me by the bar and smiled like a man who had just solved a puzzle. He crossed the room, shook my hand, and whispered, "Didn't think you'd show. I'm glad you did. Claire didn't notice him talking to me. She was too busy working the room, her voice practiced and sparkling. She didn't know that her entire speech, the deal she was about to celebrate, and the platform her company was riding on, all bore my signature at the base. I didn't come to watch her shine. I came because I wanted to see the look on her face when the man she thought was her champion stepped on stage and gave her back the truth she had erased. It began with a single email, requesting a confidential call regarding strategic acquisition opportunities. Most cold approaches I deleted, but the sender's domain, xerixpharma.com, made me pause. Xerix was a name even Claire dropped in interviews, always a few circles above her reach. I replied. The call came the next day. Malcolm Trent, head of partnerships, didn't waste time. We've tracked Oralink for years. Your infrastructure has quietly outperformed competitors in every metric. We're building a fully integrated healthcare ecosystem. We want Oralink at the center. His offer was generous, but what struck me most was the language. Center, not accessory. Control, not token buyout. I listened, asked for specifics, kept my voice neutral. I'd learned. Never show your whole hand, never get attached to promises. It wasn't until the second meeting, when their due diligence packet landed in my inbox, that I saw Claire's name in black and white. Quinn Clinical Tech, Priority Integration Candidate. I read it twice. Xerix wasn't just acquiring me. They were folding in the very company that had once erased me. The poetry was almost cruel. Over 4 months, negotiations unfolded in closed rooms and encrypted emails. I let my legal team do the talking, kept my name shielded behind holding companies and nominee directors. Xerix wanted to move fast. They saw the industry shift coming, and beneath their urgency, I saw their dependence. Their new platform would not function without Oralink's secure backbone. For years, Claire had built her empire on systems I'd invented, never realizing how deep my code ran. Every record their users accessed, every compliance report, every alert that pinged, buried lines of logic I'd written by lamplight. When final terms were set, I insisted on 2 things. First, Oralink would remain a distinct entity within Xerix, its original architecture untouchable, except by me or my chosen engineers. Second, all future clinical tech partnerships would require my signature as a voting board member. They agreed. The ink dried. The silence in my apartment that night was heavy and electric. I had crossed the Rubicon, and nobody in my old life even knew. A week later, the formal invitations arrived. Xerix was hosting a gala to announce the acquisitions and introduce the visionaries behind the innovation. My name was included in the smallest print, almost as an afterthought. Claire's name was everywhere, on the program, the email invites, the press releases. The same sister who had once told me, "Not everyone is meant for the spotlight, Hollis." This time, I RSVP'd yes. I chose a navy suit, hair back, makeup minimal, no grand entrance. Just a ticket in my own name, 1 guest, no +1. I arrived before most, watched the crowd fill in, recognized faces from old investor rounds and VC mixers. I saw Claire across the room, radiant as ever, toasting with her new partners, utterly unaware. She was preparing a speech about innovation, resilience, and sisterhood. She didn't know her entire company was now running on terms I had written, at a table I had built. And when Malcolm Trent approached, shaking my hand in front of everyone, a glint of recognition finally sparked in his eyes. But Claire, she wouldn't understand until the very last minute. That was the power of building in silence, and tonight, that silence would end. The ballroom lights softened, drawing everyone's gaze to the stage. I sat near the edge, invisible by habit. Claire was front and center, glowing with anticipation, surrounded by family and executives who believed this was her coronation. It almost was. Malcolm Trent took the stage first, his voice smooth and practiced. "Thank you for joining us to celebrate a new era in healthcare integration. Tonight, we honor the leaders who've made this possible." Polite applause. Claire readied herself, a practiced smile in place. She probably rehearsed every word she'd say about vision and perseverance. But Malcolm didn't hand her the mic. Before we announce the next phase of partnership, there's someone here whose work has quietly changed this industry, he said, scanning the audience. She's not on your program, but she's in this room. Her code, her ideas, her courage. This platform would not exist without her. A ripple moved through the crowd. People turned, uncertain, whispering names. Claire's expression faltered, just a flicker of unease in her confident mask. Hollis Quinn, Malcolm said, his words landing with weight. She's the real founder here. The silence that followed was absolute. It lasted a breath, then another. My family's heads whipped around. Claire stood frozen, her lips parted, eyes wide, caught off script for the first time I could remember. My mother dropped her napkin. My father stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. Malcolm motioned for me to come up. I rose, my legs steady. I didn't look at Claire. I didn't need to. On stage, the light was sharp, revealing. Malcolm offered his hand. I shook it, firm and cool, and let the silence say what words never could. I met the eyes of strangers, colleagues, skeptics, each one forced to reconsider the story they'd heard about, who had failed, and who had built. Claire stayed rooted in place, trembling, unable to reclaim the room. She'd spent years erasing my name, rewriting the narrative, but the truth was now center stage, undeniable. I didn't make a speech. I just stood there, letting the reality settle over every table, every rumor, every dismissal I'd ever overheard. That night, I finally took up the space I'd earned, and I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I found Claire waiting for me outside the ballroom, her face pale, clutching her clutch like it might anchor her to the marble floor. The crowd was inside, but out here, under the harsh hallway lights, the show was over. She didn't waste time. Why now, Hollis? Why tonight? Did you have to humiliate me in front of everyone? I met her gaze, steady. No one humiliated you, Claire. The truth just caught up. She bit her lip, scanning my face for regret. She wouldn't find any. You disappeared. You never fought. You just left. I had nothing left to fight with. You and Evan made sure of that. She looked away. So what now? You want an apology? A piece of the company? I reached into my bag, handed her a manila envelope. She frowned, opened it, and started to read. Her hands shook a little. It was all there. The Xerox merger details, the new corporate structure, the Orlink acquisition, my retained board voting rights, my ownership stake signed and sealed, outnumbering hers in every important room. She blinked at the papers, not understanding. You have controlling interest. After all this time. I nodded. Every time Quinn Clinical used Orlink, you paid me. Every contract, every integration. I signed off. You built your empire on my code, Claire. Now the system belongs to me. Officially. She was quiet for a moment, her pride breaking through the shock. This is what you wanted all along? I shook my head. What I wanted was to be left in peace, but you couldn't let me have even that, so I took back what you stole. I let the silence linger, heavy and final. She stood in the corridor, holding the evidence of how little she'd ever understood about me. I turned and walked away, leaving her with nothing but a name she could no longer erase, and a future that didn't belong to her anymore. I left the ballroom without ceremony, stepping out into the cool hush of city night. The noise faded behind me. Each breath felt lighter, my chest no longer tight with old resentments. I had walked away before, empty-handed, dismissed, erased. But tonight, I left with everything I needed. As I waited for my car at the curb, a young analyst from Xerox approached, badge still clipped to her jacket. She hesitated, then said quietly, Miss Quinn, I recognized you. Your early work, Trace, was required reading in my grad program. It made me want to build things that last. I smiled, genuine and soft. Thank you. Remember, whatever you create, keep your name on it. Don't let anyone write you out. She nodded, inspired, then disappeared into the revolving doors, carrying a new story forward. My car pulled up. I slid inside and watched the city pass by. The streets familiar, but the world somehow changed. At a stoplight, I glanced across to the hospital's new wing, lights blazing above fresh glass doors. There, Lit in steel and blue was the new logo, Oralink Health Systems, platform design by Quinn. My name, real, permanent, exactly where it belonged. Years of being written out, of family rumors and whispered dismissals, couldn't erase what I'd built. The truth was in every corridor, every system that healed, every door bearing my work. They said I failed, but now, every person who walked through those doors would see the name they tried to erase and know who really built their future. Some legacies are written quietly, some names, once reclaimed, become impossible to ignore.